How unique are you? Is it possible for people to have the same genetic makeup? Well, since the discovery of DNA in 1869, the idea that everyone is unique has been further solidified. So, what is DNA? DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is akin to an instruction manual and a blueprint for everything in a person's body. With the exception of identical twins, each person has a distinct and unique DNA structure. A DNA molecule is a long and twisting chain known as double helix. In human cells, DNA is tightly wrapped into 23 pairs of chromosomes. One member of the chromosomal pair comes from the mother, and the other from the father. In the Philippines, the 2007 rules on DNA evidence governs the use of DNA in the resolution of certain cases. Under the law cards exchange principle, it provides that when a suspect comes in contact with an object or person, a cross transfer of evidence occurs, and this may include DNA. This principle is the reason why DNA evidence is preferred to be used in forensic cases, paternity testing, historical investigations, missing persons investigations, mass disasters, and convicted felon DNA database. But how are we able to gather and match DNA of one person from another? DNA is contained in the blood, semen, saliva, urine, hair, teeth, bone, tissue, perspiration, or vaginal secretion of a human person. An important concept is the topic of DNA testing. DNA testing means verified and credible scientific methods with the aim of determining with reasonable certainty whether or not the DNA obtained from two or more samples originates from the same person. With that said, the question remains: is DNA testing substantially reliable under the Philippine setting? In the 1997 case of Lim versus Court of Appeals, the introduction of DNA as evidence in the Philippine courts was initially received with caution when the Supreme Court held that DNA, being a relatively new science, had not yet been accorded official recognition by our courts. However, in the 2002 case of People versus Vallejo, the court discussed DNA analysis as evidence. This may be considered a 180-degree turn from the court's wary attitude towards DNA testing. In the Vallejo case, the DNA profile from the vaginal swabs taken from the rape victim matched the accused's DNA profile. The court affirmed the accused's conviction of rape with homicide and sentenced him to death. To explain further, when a crime is committed, material is collected from the scene of a crime or from the victim's body for the suspect's DNA. This is the evidence sample. The evidence sample is then matched with the reference sample. The purpose of DNA testing is to ascertain whether an association exists between the evidence sample and the reference sample. The samples collected are subject to various chemical processes to establish their profile. The competence of DNA testing was further strengthened in the case of Estate of Rogelio Ong versus Diaz, where the court relied on the competence of DNA evidence and that the death of a party does not ipso facto negate the application of DNA analysis so long as there exists suitable biological sample of his DNA. Despite these court pronouncements, there remains issues regarding the uncertainty that must be addressed to determine the DNA testing's admissibility. These factors may depend on whether the evidence tends to prove or disprove a fact that, under the applicable law, might matter to the outcome of the case, whether the expert presenting the evidence is qualified, whether the information is derived from scientifically acceptable procedures, and whether the potential for unfair prejudice or time consumption substantially outweighs the probative value of the information. Hence, despite the growing faith of the court in DNA testing, it is too soon to tell whether or not the Philippines is substantially equipped with the expertise and technology to maximize the use of DNA testing to cover a wider application, and whether it can truly be reliable in all types of cases requiring its applicability.